justified by what they do and not by faith alone. Because why? Faith performs, right? In the same way, verse 25, here it is. Was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. James chapter 2. Again, Rahab the harlot, right? So the story all comes together here. We understand that faith moves. That's what it's telling us in James chapter 2. Not talking about trust. Not just talking about, I believe, but living it. Living it. Doesn't this intrigue you folks? That Abraham and Rahab are spoken of in the same phrase? The same context? Doesn't that blow your mind? Because sometimes we consider greatness more than what God considers. God says great faith. That's what I want.
I'm just looking at Joshua 2 in verses 8 through 14, and I don't want to take up a bunch of your time, but if people want to jot that down, Joshua 2, 8 through 14, it really shows you more of Rahab's faith. Right
Good.
there.
Yeah, because that's where it actually happened. That's where it actually happened when the spies came, getting ready for the, And Joshua, by the way, is very intriguing as you read through all of that, because you see, God working, God honoring faith, God dishonoring faithlessness too. Because, here they have this great conquest in Jericho, but they get into Ai. Trouble happens.
Did he honor Rahab? Wasn't she, she became the wife of one of the men in that tribe? I thought it was one of the spies or the leader.
She was in the lineage of Jesus.
Right. I was just going to say that. I don't know necessarily who.
She was the mother of Boaz, maybe?
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's correct.
Yeah. And of course, Boaz is
married
part of the
Ruth.
story of Ruth. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because he was ruthless before her.
He was ruthless. Absolutely.
It's true.
Oh,
What's your mother's name?
Just gotta write some of these down, I guess.
I've tried for years to be ruthless, but my mother-in-law's name is Ruth. That will be cut out of the tape. You won't hear that. I'm intrigued. Abraham, Rahab together in context, but it's faith that God is focusing in on. Fantastic. Faith steps up, faith acts, faith performs. Without deeds of righteousness, James says, faith is dead. Faith is dead. By the way, there's portions of this James chapter 2 where James even makes the proclamation that, the demons believe and tremble. But the thing that the demons have not done, is that they have not believed unto righteousness. They have not put it into the right element of trusting faith in Jesus Christ. So, here we see faith plus deeds. Faith is evidenced with works of righteousness. James chapter 2, verse 23, 24, 25, we just read it. God does not see Rahab as the prostitute here. He sees her great moving faith. Wow faith. Wow faith. I think we even wrote that up here. Yeah, wow faith. Right? The wow factor is presented by wow faith. God is in the wow business. God wows the culture around you by wow people. And wow people move in faith. Now we're coming to the end here of this series. Because we've seen 10 faith friends. And we're kind of ending here today, of course, talking about Rahab. And then they mention a few other people, just the remaining verses here. We go down verse 32 all the way down to 40, and it's very interesting, some of the things that God mentions there. And we'll just kind of mention that in passing next time as we wrap this all up. And then the video I was going to show today, we'll show next week, because it'll really wrap up for you this whole idea of believing. Believing. You see? Because can I put it this way? The thing that happens is that we get caught up many, many, many times when we talk about faith, and we talk about it, because what we want to do is we want to see these people of faith, and we want to compare it to our level of faith. And our level, and essentially that's what I'm doing with you. But God wants you to see that there's a whole world out there that has no acting faith. And many of them out there don't have reason to believe unless they see wow people walking in faith, right? And they get to see the wow factor. And they get to understand. They get to hear the story of God in each one of our lives. And so it goes beyond. Faith, friends, has an effect for you. And that is that you, next slide, is that you believe God. And I think we gave you a double believe here in your notes. So you can cross out that. Or just don't write it in. The B is believe. You believe God. You act in faith. And what happened? God wows your world. He wows your world. And he wants your wow world and your wow faith to wow the world around you.
Wow.
So here's the 10th faith friend, Rahab. She's a bit different than the others. God, though, saw her as a faith friend. He honors her great moving faith no matter what the vessel. So I don't think Rahab, if I can say this, and this is my thought, I don't think she remained there. Do you? I think when she saw God really move in her life and her family's life, she began to move away from the thing that she kept being called. Prostitute. She moved in faith. God moved in saving her. And even though the Bible doesn't tell us much more about her except that she became in the lineage of Jesus, I kind of think Rahab's faith that spared her life and spared her family's life was life-changing. Life-changing. Don't you? God wants to wow you so much that you join in this great adventure of fusion that we call it. Faith plus life. Or life plus faith. Faith plus life. You know? In other words, folks, this is not a Sunday thing only. Right? It's a day-to-day thing. When things are really good, when the fridge is really full, and when things aren't that good, and things are sparing. Let me just give you a little illustration as I kind of wrap this up today. And it's a personal one because yesterday I happened to, Kathy actually opened up a bag that had these little discs in them that we used today that didn't work for us. But anyhow, in that there was some old files that I had burnt from old computers, and I mean way back. And I had a file in there from 1994. You know what it was called? It was called my journal. I wrote down Michael P. Tremblay Journal. You know, and it was some events that were happening way back in 1994. And I'm reading through this, and I'm looking at it, and there were just really, I mean, this is way back, and And I remember writing, when I'm reading it, I remember exactly where I was, exactly what I was writing. And maybe today I'll let Kathy read it. Because it was way, way back. And it was feelings that I wrote down that she never even realized about. But there were a couple of things that happened. You know, we were over in Maine at the time. We had left our home and our work and everything up here in Wentworth. And it was the first house we ever bought, which is, by the way, up for sale again, but I don't want to buy it. And a nice old farmhouse. Kids grew up there. They had a ball, right? I used to hunt around there. We drove by it the other day. And it was kind of interesting. We did that, and then here I'm opening this little thing. Anyhow, how God worked in the sale of that house, because we had renters that were living in it, and then they moved out, and they kind of did some things that renters do. And anyhow, we were able to sell the house. We didn't make anything. It was kind of like an even Steven thing, you know. But God was good. We needed to get out of that. We're living in Maine. I'm pastoring a church over there. So we had to come back. And as I'm reading through this, there are obstacles all along the way. And God overcame each and every single one of them. One of the obstacles was that there was a driveway that went into the house from the road through someone else's land. And of course, it had been like a thing that was grandfathered in, but the person that owned that strip wanted to sell it as a complete thing, so they started to make a stink during the time of the sale of the home. And so another obstacle, you know. And do you know when this arose? You know, I mean, we're living in Maine. We're now at the office to sign the paperwork, all right, that was going to finally seal the deal. And that's when he said, well, your neighbor is doing this. And I mean, Kathy, I wrote it right in the thing, she couldn't handle anymore. Do you remember you went outside, we had a little puppy dog, and you went out with the dog, and you hurt your ankle, remember? Mm-hmm. So that's all in there. And I'm remembering all this, I'm saying, wow. But he made a phone call, and it was like almost immediate. God, boom, intervened. It was just amazing to see the intervention of God. We had to put the electric back on. That was going to cost $113, you know. I'm a poor preacher over in Maine, you know, and 113 at that time was a hefty amount of money. And we had to scrape to kind of bring it up, and we finally got it. And the realtor said, you're probably going to be able to get that back at the sale, you know. And but we hadn't heard anything about it until when we get there, finally we hear this thing happen, and then he made the phone call, and boom, it went through. It was a go. Actually, I think we signed the paper without knowing that, and then left. And we got a phone call, and he said it was a go, and number two, you're getting your $113 back. So, you know, ooh, God's at work. Wow. That wasn't the amazing thing that I read in that. That was one little incident. And this is the tenet of all this. We had taken our oldest son, who is now 32 years old, we had taken him over to Word of Life to go to camp that summer. And I had all sorts of emotions about leaving him there, you know, and all this. And I wrote all that. That's the stuff you're going to laugh at when you read it. And but when we went back to get him, and it's a 5-hour trip from the Maine-New Hampshire line all the way over to Schroon Lake, New York. And so on a Saturday previous is when we dropped him off. We went back the Saturday after that. We left like 3 o'clock in the morning so we could be there for 9-ish or 7-ish or whatever to pick him up. And I wrote in there for some reason that when we were getting back to the area, we were almost out of gas in the car. And God, and so we're just trusting God. He pushed us, this is kind of like what I wrote down, it's like he pushed us to the gas station in Milton, New Hampshire, that was just like 3 miles from where we lived. And I was able to put in $2 worth of gas, you see? And then we got home. But I'm saying this, I'm saying, wow. You know, here's some stories of how God, you know, even in little things, some things kind of big, God wowed our world when we trusted in Him. And I remember reading through there that there were some really deep times of devotion that I was having with the Almighty. So it's interesting, isn't it, that we are able to take these life situations, put faith and life together, and see God do these wow things, the wow factors. And then gives us opportunity.